The old man hit the ground with a sound that silenced the sidewalk. It wasn't a scream, not even a shout, just the rough skid of his palm catching pavement, his body folding hard under the shove. Skin split at the base of his thumb. His cane clattered away on the concrete like a tossed wrench. His cap, marked boldly with one word, veteran, bounced once, then settled upside down in the gutter. "Stay down!" Officer Blake Mercer's voice cut through the air like a slap. Harsh. Absolute. It carried the weight of authority unchecked, the kind that filled silence with fear and demanded no explanation. Raymond Dawes, 74 years old, winced as he shifted. He tried to rise on one elbow, breath trembling from the fall. His voice, ragged but composed, answered low. "I was just bringing coffee to my son. He works here, please." Mercer's boot edged forward, warning in its posture. His hand hovered near his holstered weapon, as if the frail man in denim and flannel might suddenly transform into a threat. Around them, the sidewalk was frozen. Civilians halted mid-step, unsure whether to film, flee, or intervene. A group of firefighters stood still on the steps of the municipal building. Suited in full turnout gear, they had just finished a morning drill. One of them, Captain Raul Hernandez, watched with narrowed eyes. His arms were folded. His jaw was tight. One firefighter clenched his fists. Another looked toward the parking lot. A young teenager had his phone up already, trembling hands, unsure if he was documenting truth or trauma. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, painting the moment in sharp gold and dull gray. Behind them, through the glass of the firehouse, a wheelchair sat just visible. Inside, Eric Dawes, Ray's son, waited quietly at his desk. 2 sandwiches and a thermos never delivered. Then, faintly from down the block, the low grumble of an engine. Not sirens, not police, just an idle diesel cough and the soft crunch of rubber tires turning in. Change had just begun to arrive. The day had begun quietly, as most did for Raymond Dawes. At 5:14 in the morning, the old alarm clock on his bedside table buzzed once. Not loud, but insistent, like a friend who knew better than to be ignored. Ray's eyes opened before the second buzz. He had never needed much sleep. Not since the war. Not since life became more about keeping promises than chasing dreams. His home was modest, a 1-story brick rancher on the edge of town, tucked behind a line of sugar maples and a leaning mailbox with the name Dawes painted in flaking white letters. The front porch sagged a little at one corner, but the flagpole at its edge stood straight and proud, bearing the American flag he lowered each evening and raised again with the sun. This morning, he moved slower than usual. The arthritis had set deep into his left knee after last winter's ice storm, and his hands needed a moment before they obeyed him without complaint. Still, he moved with a quiet determination, the kind built not from urgency, but from years of honoring small routines. He folded the blanket at the foot of his bed, pressed it smooth at the corners, and ran a hand across the old photograph on his dresser. A woman with smiling eyes, and beside her, a boy no older than 7. "Morning, Beth," he said softly to the photo. "Coffee's on." In the kitchen, he brewed 2 cups the old way. No pods, no machines. Just grounds in a dented kettle, and water boiled on the stovetop. The aroma filled the house like a ritual, one that comforted even the walls. On the counter, he placed 2 sandwiches, turkey and cheddar, no tomato, the way Eric liked them. He wrapped them carefully in wax paper, slipped them into a paper bag, and added a folded napkin on top. Next to the bag, he set the thermos. It was old, battered with a few dents, but it still kept the heat. On its side, faded lettering spelled out, "Department of Fire Services, Station 9. A relic, like him. Eric had been strong once. He still was, just in different ways now. Once a firefighter like his grandfather, Eric had collapsed during a fire rescue 6 years ago. A massive stroke. The doctors said it was a miracle he'd survived. The price had been high. He'd lost most use of his left side, and the firehouse had transitioned him to light desk duties out of respect. He managed the radios now, some paperwork, and the occasional training roster. It wasn't the job he had dreamed of, but Ray had seen the way his son still wore the station badge on his fleece vest. Proud, if quieter than before. At 6 a.m., Ray slipped on his flannel jacket, capped his head with the navy blue hat marked Veteran, and carried the lunch bag and thermos to the truck. The old Ford took 2 tries to start, but he coaxed it to life with a gentle tap to the dashboard, like one would to an old friend's shoulder. His drive into town was peaceful. The streets were mostly empty, the town still wrapped in fog. He passed the bakery where he'd worked for 15 years after retiring from the steel mill. Past the gas station where he used to stop for black licorice. Past the war memorial, the one with 6 names carved from the high school class of '68, 5 of whom Ray had known, 2 of whom he'd buried. He reached the municipal complex just after sunrise. It was still quiet, except for a few city workers setting up cones in the parking lot and a couple of police cruisers idling with lights off. Ray parked in the visitor's spot closest to the firehouse door and checked the lunch bag once more. Everything was still warm. Inside the complex, a young woman with short hair and sharp posture stood behind the front security desk. She barely looked up when Ray approached. "Sir, you'll need clearance to enter the building," she said. "I'm just dropping lunch to my son, Eric Dawes, Fire Station Dispatch. I do this every Tuesday." "You still need clearance," she said again, a little sharper this time. Ray offered a soft smile. "I understand, miss. Maybe you could give him a call." She sighed, pushed a button, and muttered something into her mic. Ray stood patiently, the paper bag warming his fingers. After a minute, she looked back up. "He said you can come in. Make it quick." "Appreciate you," Ray said. She didn't answer. That was the first ripple. By the time Ray crossed the small lobby and pushed through the door into the municipal courtyard, a new scene was already forming. Cones had been placed, barriers shifted. 2 patrol officers flanked the far end of the walkway, speaking into radios, gesturing to one another. Ray didn't think much of it. He simply walked the path he always did, lunch in one hand, thermos in the other, mind already rehearsing the story he'd share with Eric, probably something about the sparrow he saw chasing a crow off the fence this morning. He didn't see Officer Mercer approach from behind the cruiser, didn't see the flash of suspicion in the man's eyes, didn't hear the initial command. All he felt was the sharp grip on his shoulder and the voice barking behind him. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You need to step back. Now." Ray turned, confused. I said step back. Show me your hands." The next moment was a blur. The thermos dropped. The bag crumpled. Mercer's arm twisted Ray's elbow back, pushing him down and away from the walkway. The ground was hard. His hip cracked painfully against the concrete. He tried to brace, but his wrist gave. The sting of impact buzzed up his arm. Mercer barked again. "Stay down! Don't move!" Ray didn't. He simply lay there, winded, hurting, blinking up at the gray sky. Officer Blake Mercer had his knee angled just close enough to suggest force, not close enough to justify it. A practiced posture, not taught in any manual, but learned all the same. How to press down with presence instead of pressure. How to command with volume and stance, not just policy. He stood over Ray Dawes like a final warning. The old man's hands were open, flat to the pavement. His knees were bent, one twisted awkwardly from the fall, his right wrist bruised and cradled close to his chest. "I said stay down," Mercer snapped again. "This is a secure zone." The courtyard had begun to change. Foot traffic slowed, heads turned. Behind the glass windows of the fire station, movement rippled like wind through tall grass. Firefighters stepped into view, 2 at first, then 5. Captain Raul Hernandez emerged next, still in turnout pants, coat half-zipped. He paused, eyes narrowing at the scene unfolding before him. Inside the dispatch room, Eric Dawes stared at the monitor, confused. The internal camera showed the security courtyard, and his father, down on the ground. The lunch bag was crumpled near the curb. The thermos had rolled into the shadow of a concrete planter. Eric reached for the radio. "Unit 6, this is Dispatch 2. You got someone down near the east walkway?" Elderly male in blue cap. No reply came. Outside, Mercer continued. "You can't just wander into government buildings. What's in the bag?" Ray looked up, breathing steady despite the pain. "Sandwiches, coffee." "That's not an answer," Mercer barked. "Hands where I can see them." "They're on the ground, son. You're looking right at them." A few feet away, a young mother stood frozen with her toddler, one hand on the child's shoulder, the other clutched around a phone. She wasn't filming yet, but the impulse trembled at the edge of her fingertips. A man in a delivery uniform leaned against his van door, eyebrows drawn low, watching. He didn't speak. Not yet. Raul Hernandez stepped forward. The silence he brought was heavier than Mercer's shouting. "Officer!" Raul called out, voice firm but even. "That man is Ray Dawes. His son works inside. He brings him lunch every Tuesday. You can check the logs." Mercer didn't turn. "I don't need ID from the peanut gallery." "I'm not a gallery. I'm the station captain." Raul's boots scraped the concrete as he advanced. Another firefighter followed him, then another. They didn't rush. They walked with purpose. Behind them, someone in the hallway pressed record on a body cam. Not police-issued, fire-issued. Ray slowly pushed to one elbow. His breath caught at the pain in his wrist. "Can I please just sit up? My son—" "You were told to stay down," Mercer shouted, stepping closer. This time a few gasps sounded from the growing onlookers. A teenager with earbuds slipped them out. A barista from the cafe across the street stepped outside, holding her apron like a towel in nervous fingers. The moment was no longer small. It had gathered air and weight, like storm clouds forming from a thin gray mist. A woman in a blue coat spoke softly to no one in particular. "Isn't that the veteran who gave blood during the summer blackout?" "Ray Dawes," someone else whispered. "He helped my uncle fix a ramp after the flood." The sound of shoes tapping over concrete came quickly. A younger man in plain clothes moved forward. Jason Weber, a paramedic off duty but nearby. He raised a hand. "Hey, officer. I know this guy. He's not a threat. Let's just—" Mercer turned on him. "Step back. You want to interfere with a law enforcement operation?" Jason halted. "Just trying to help." "I didn't ask." Ray coughed. His voice was hoarse now, but not desperate. Just tired. "Son," he said to Mercer, "you're making a mistake. Please, let me up. I didn't mean any harm. My boy's in there." Mercer's jaw flexed. His hand dropped to his belt. Not for his weapon, not yet. But the gesture was loud, silent though it was. Raul stopped 5 feet away. "Back off!" Mercer snapped at him. "Not until you do," Raul said quietly. "Do I need to call for backup?" Raul glanced to his left. 6 firefighters stood behind him now. Not in a line. Not yet. But they were facing the same direction. "You do whatever you think is best," Raul answered. "But I'm not letting you treat one of ours like this. He's not one of yours." Raul didn't blink. "He's all of ours." The statement landed heavy. Around them, the crowd thickened. People weren't just watching now. They were seeing the shape of something wrong. Seeing the way Mercer's posture had changed, his voice louder than needed, his actions misaligned with the moment. And they were seeing Ray, not as a stranger, but as someone familiar, someone quiet, someone whose kindness they had passed 100 times and never truly noticed until now. Ray sat upright finally, knees bent, palms resting on the concrete. His breathing slowed. His eyes flicked toward the thermos, then the lunch bag. A sigh slipped from him, quiet, almost swallowed by the wind. Mercer stood still. His back was rigid, but his feet had shifted. He looked up now, really looked, and saw the ring forming around him. Not hostile, not violent, but deeply human. Faces, eyewitnesses, voices that had not yet spoken, but might. Still, he raised his voice. "Everyone's making this a bigger deal than it is. You don't get to ignore security just because you're old." A hush followed. The barista lowered her eyes. The delivery man crossed his arms. The mother pulled her child close. Jason Weber muttered under his breath. And from within the firehouse, behind the dispatcher's window, a red light began to blink. The emergency intercom from Eric's station chair. A new voice sounded over the speaker. Steady, firm, cracked by grief. "That's my father." It was Eric. His voice carried from the control room to the courtyard, broadcast over the internal system. "And if you're laying hands on him, we've got a problem." The sound of the intercom faded, replaced by something else. Something older than this courtyard. Older than Officer Mercer's anger. Older than the pain in Ray's wrist. It was the sound of rushing water. The distant crack of rifle fire. The thick, metallic scent of blood mixing with sweat and jungle rot. And beneath it all, the thunder of rain that would not stop. Vietnam, 1969. Cao Zhou was not on any map Ray's mother would have known. It was a small crossing. A footbridge stretched like a thread between two hills in Quang Tri Province. On paper, it was of little tactical importance. In reality, it had become the only way out. The river below had risen fast after 3 days of monsoon. The mud sucked at everything. Boots, equipment, even courage. Ray, just 20 years old, knelt at the edge of the bridge with a battered field radio and 3 bullets in his leg. Smoke billowed from the trees behind them. What had started as a recon sweep turned into a full retreat after they stumbled onto an entrenched machine gun nest. The unit had scattered, half pinned down, half wounded. Ray had pulled Private Thomason from the brush by his harness, dragging him 40 yards under fire before making it to the edge of the river. Thomason's face was pale. His chest was a mess of shrapnel and red foam. "I can't make it," Thomason gasped. Ray's knuckles were bloodied, his grip around the straps unrelenting. "You don't get to decide that." "It hurts, Ray." "I know. I'm holding you back." "You're the reason I'm still moving," Ray whispered. He slung Thomason's arm across his shoulders, gritted his teeth, and stepped onto the bridge. The boards creaked, soaked through, slippery with algae and blood. A shot rang out, then another. Wood splintered near his boots. He didn't stop. Behind them, someone shouted. One of theirs? The enemy? Ray didn't know. Didn't care. His world had narrowed to 27 wooden planks, and the man dying beside him. Halfway across, Thomason lost consciousness. His full weight slumped. Ray's back screamed. The pain in his thigh blurred his vision, but he kept walking. He reached the other side with a roar, knees buckling as he dropped to the gravel. Medics rushed forward, grabbing Thomason, lifting him to the stretcher. Ray didn't follow. He just lay there for a moment, rain pounding his chest like drum beats on steel. A sergeant kneeled beside him, eyes wide. "Dawes, why the hell didn't you leave him?" Ray turned his face to the sky. Rain ran into his eyes, but he didn't blink. "Because I said I'd get him home." Decades later, that promise still echoed. Even now, in the concrete silence of the municipal courtyard, Ray's hand reached slowly toward the crumpled paper bag. A different burden, yes, but carried with the same weight, the same vow, to show up, to protect, to deliver. The courtyard held its breath. The last word from the intercom still lingered. Not loud, but impossibly clear. "That's my father." It had been Eric Dawes, the voice of a man changed by tragedy, hardened by stroke, but never silenced. He had once run into burning homes. Now he sat behind bulletproof glass. But his voice still carried weight, especially in this place, especially today. Officer Mercer blinked, just for a second. His grip on the radio loosened. His spine shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if his certainty had been scratched. But the tension in his jaw returned just as quickly. He looked down at Ray again, who now sat up fully, breathing slow, steady, watching. "You shouldn't have crossed the line," Mercer muttered. "Protocol's clear." Raul Hernandez had heard enough. The firefighter captain stepped forward, this time without pause. He stopped directly between Mercer and Ray, his boots planted square on the painted line of the courtyard. That man isn't your suspect, Raoul said. He's a father bringing lunch to his son, a man who's walked this path 100 times, and you've just slammed him into the ground like he's a criminal. You're interfering. No, Raoul said. I'm standing. Behind Raoul, the others moved. First one firefighter, then 3, then 5. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just firm, steady steps across the courtyard as they joined their captain, forming a quiet line of turnout coats and worn boots between Ray and the man who had forgotten what authority was meant to be. They didn't speak. They didn't argue. They simply stood. Ray looked up, eyes blinking against the light. One of the younger firefighters bent slowly and retrieved the veteran cap from the ground. He dusted it off with a brush of his sleeve, then stepped forward and placed it gently back on Ray's head. A murmur rippled through the crowd, now thickening along the edges of the square. More cell phones rose. More voices whispered, "That's 15 of them. They're building a wall. Who is he?" "He's the one who fixed the hydrant behind the school, with his own tools. The guy who replaced our flag rope last year." From across the street, the cafe owner came out, holding a white apron in her hands. She didn't say a word, just folded it over her arm and stepped closer. Inside the building, Eric had wheeled himself into the main hallway. He couldn't do much, not quickly, but his presence, too, was felt. Fellow dispatchers watched him, then looked through the window toward the growing standoff. Jason Weber, the paramedic who had tried to speak earlier, stepped forward again, but slower this time, more deliberate. "Officer Mercer," he said, "you may want to stop." "Step back," Mercer said. "All of you." But his voice had changed. It no longer rang with dominance. It was defensive now, brittle, like a door trying to hold against a wind too strong. Raoul didn't move. He just turned his head and spoke to the crowd. "His name is Raymond Dawes, United States Army, retired, Vietnam veteran, lifelong resident of this town." He paused. "This man pulled my father out of a frozen car in '78. Off duty. No coat. No gloves. Just did it. Never even told the paper. Just went home." The silence that followed was a weight pressed into the concrete. Another voice spoke. A woman near the crosswalk, eyes rimmed with tears. "He shoveled my driveway for 3 years after my husband passed. Wouldn't take a dime. Said it was just being neighborly." A boy, no older than 8, stepped forward with a small folded piece of paper, a drawing of a waving flag. He placed it on the curb beside Ray, then backed away without a word. Mercer looked around, saw what was forming. Not a mob, not a rebellion, but something older, stronger, community. He opened his mouth again, words half-formed, then stopped. The firefighters shifted. A full row now, 15 of them, broad shoulders, sun-worn faces, soot-stained jackets. No one shouted. No one flinched. They weren't armed. They didn't need to be. Ray, still seated, watched it all quietly. He reached for the thermos. It was dented, scuffed from the fall, but it hadn't spilled. He brushed the dirt from it and cradled it in his lap like something sacred. "I just wanted him to have his coffee hot," he said softly. No one replied. They didn't need to. The town had answered in full. The courtyard no longer buzzed. It pulsed. Not with sirens or orders or the bark of authority, but with the hushed murmur of humanity awakening to itself. 15 firefighters now stood shoulder to shoulder across the painted stone, their boots aligned as if by unseen command. Helmets tucked under arms, eyes forward. No one shouted. No one needed to. The air had shifted, that old kind of silence that made people straighten their backs, remove their hats, and lower their voices without quite knowing why. It was reverence. Raymond Dawes slowly, carefully rose to his feet. Raoul reached out a hand, but Ray waved him off gently. He wanted to do this part on his own. His knees wobbled under him, not from fear, but from the full weight of years, of mornings started in silence, of names remembered alone, of service rendered without applause. He brushed the dust from his flannel, picked up the paper lunch bag, straightened the creases with careful fingers. lifted the thermos once more and tested the lid. Still sealed, still warm. Then, without a word, he adjusted the cap on his head. The veteran embroidery across the front now glinted faintly in the late morning sun, scuffed and faded, but unmistakable. From somewhere nearby, a woman placed her hand over her heart. From the opposite sidewalk, a child followed suit, and slowly, almost as if moved by a single current of thought, others began to stand straighter, to face Ray, to bow their heads. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It wasn't a chant, nor a song, nor even applause, just presence, pure, undiluted human presence. A teenage boy standing by a tree wiped his eyes without shame. A man in a delivery uniform placed his cap to his chest. The young mother knelt so her daughter could see clearly. Ray turned slightly, his eyes scanning the faces. He didn't cry, not quite, but his throat moved like a man trying to swallow something far larger than his voice could carry. From behind the wall of firefighters, Eric Dawes wheeled forward slowly, the glass door held open by a city worker who had once been a rookie on Eric's crew. Ray's eyes met his son's. There, in that gaze, passed 1,000 unspoken things. Apologies never needed. Pride too old for words. A quiet echo of promises made long ago and kept without witness. Eric didn't speak. He only raised a trembling hand and offered a crisp, deliberate salute. Shoulder tight with effort. Eyes shining with tears he no longer tried to hide. Ray returned it, 2 fingers to his cap. Not sharp, not parade-ready, but real. The kind of salute that carried lifetimes. The air thickened with something sacred. A local reporter, camera in hand, had arrived just minutes earlier, but she didn't move to interview or interrupt. She stood off to the side, filming quietly, the lens lowered respectfully. She'd later write that it was the first story she didn't want to narrate, only to witness. One of the firefighters took off his jacket and placed it gently over Ray's shoulders, not for warmth, but for honor. Another handed Ray a bottle of water and murmured, "Sir." That was all. Just sir. Ray nodded. From the street, the sound of engines faded in. Not police cruisers, not chaos, but trucks, city maintenance, off-duty responders, old pickup trucks with flags fluttering from the rear beds. No horns, just arrival, just presence. Then came the boy again, the one with the drawing. He stepped forward, trembling slightly, and handed it to Ray directly this time. "It's for your wall," he said, "like the ones at school." Ray bent down, his joints resisting, and accepted it with both hands. "I'll frame it," he said. The crowd exhaled, a long, almost imperceptible release. A few soft claps rose, brief, reverent, not celebration but agreement. "We see you, we hear you, we remember." Ray turned to Mercer for the first time. The officer had said nothing in the last 10 minutes. He stood back now, off-center, eyes hollow. His hand rested at his belt, not with defiance, but with disorientation, as if the uniform no longer felt like it belonged to him. Ray didn't speak, he only looked, and in that look was something far heavier than confrontation. It was disappointment, quiet, restrained, the kind that changes a man more than anger ever could. Mercer looked away. Ray turned toward the firehouse, lunch still warm in his hand, thermos tucked beneath his arm. The crowd opened like a tide receding, clearing a gentle path. No one needed to guide it. It happened on its own. He walked slowly, shoulders straightening with each step. At the threshold of the station door, Raoul paused beside him and asked in a low voice, "Would you like us to walk you in?" Ray smiled, soft and weathered. "I believe you already have." Then, with his son waiting just inside, Ray stepped forward, not as a victim, not as a headline, not even as a veteran, but as a man who had finally been seen. The next morning the town woke to headlines, not on national networks, not from any capital newsroom, but right where it mattered. On the front page of the Montville Register, under a single photograph, Raymond Dawes, standing in his flannel jacket, veteran cap slightly askew, one hand resting on the shoulder of his son, both framed by a wall of firefighters in silent formation. A father, a soldier, a moment we won't forget. The article didn't name Officer Blake Mercer directly, but it didn't have to. Everyone already knew. In a town like Montville, memory moved faster than print. By noon, the mayor's office issued a statement. Measured, respectful, but firm. We are conducting a full internal review of yesterday's events. Our deepest apologies go to Mr. Raymond Dawes and his family. As of this morning, Officer Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The police chief followed with a shorter message. He looked directly into the camera during a live-streamed statement, eyes shadowed, voice tight. We are sworn to protect, to listen, to respect. Yesterday we failed at all three. Behind the scenes, the repercussions came quickly. Officer Mercer didn't return to the force that week, or the next. His desk was quietly cleared by a colleague, his nameplate removed without ceremony. He wasn't dismissed outright. Policies required process, but the silence around him was louder than any verdict. At the firehouse, a printed sign appeared on the break room wall just 2 days later. Simple words, typed in black, laminated. Tuesday 9:12 a.m., coffee with Ray. And at City Hall, a meeting was held. No press, no fanfare. Just local leaders, veterans advocates, and first responders in a quiet room with folding chairs and scratch paper. Captain Raul Hernandez stood at the front and spoke plainly. We don't need a parade. We need protocols, recognition training, de-escalation that begins with respect. Ray was invited, but he declined to speak. He simply sat in the corner, hands folded, listening. When asked if he had anything to add, he said only, I appreciate your time. Later that week, the council passed a resolution, a small one, but important. All municipal buildings were to designate veteran access lanes and update security policy with de-escalation training reviewed by retired service members. The document was signed with a single brass pen passed hand to hand, ending with the mayor's firm stroke and a whispered, long overdue. Meanwhile, word of the incident spread across neighboring towns. A clip of the moment where Eric saluted his father was shared over 18,000 times in 48 hours. People didn't rage, they didn't argue. They remembered. In diners and waiting rooms, in barbershops and churches, conversations turned reflective. We used to be better at recognizing men like that. My granddad would have stood just like those firefighters. We forget too much, until something like this reminds us. At the town square, a small wooden plaque was quietly affixed to the base of the flagpole. No unveiling, no speech. It read, In honor of Raymond Dawes, who showed us how to stand by simply standing. The town had moved on, as towns do. The headlines faded. The phone videos stopped circulating. Even the plaque on the flagpole began to gather a thin film of dust. But some things stayed. Not loud, not visible, just present, like Ray Dawes. Every Tuesday, just after sunrise, the same truck pulled into the same lot. The driver moved slower now, not from injury, but from age. He no longer needed to explain himself to security. The desk clerk greeted him by name. A fresh badge was already waiting by the scanner. He didn't speak much, never had. But every visit was met with nods, handshakes, and the occasional quiet salute. Not regulation, but heartfelt. Eric would wait just inside, eyes watching the doorway like a man checking the clock of his own heartbeat. He'd smile as Ray entered, and Ray would hand him the same bag, 2 sandwiches, a thermos, and a folded napkin. They rarely spoke about the day it happened. Not out of avoidance, just because the silence between them already said enough. One evening, long after the sun had dipped behind the town's western ridge, Ray found himself walking again. Not toward the firehouse this time, but toward a hill just beyond the public library, a place most forgot existed. It was a veterans' plot. Small, well-kept. No bronze statues, just grass, a few white stones, and the low hum of wind weaving through pines. Ray's boots crunched gently over the gravel path. He carried no flowers, just a coin in his pocket. An old challenge coin, worn smooth at the edges. He reached a headstone near the corner, bent stiffly at the knees, and placed the coin at the base. The name was one he'd known for more than 60 years. Private Daniel Thomason, United States Army, 1950-1969. Ray brushed some dried leaves from the marker. His fingers lingered over the carved letters. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, cap in hand, wind brushing the crown of his silvered hair. Then, almost to the stone, almost to the sky, he whispered, "Still delivering, buddy." He stepped back, gave one final nod, then walked the long way home. Down the hill, across the empty street, past the bakery where Thomason once swore he'd work when the war was over, past the gas station where Ray still bought licorice, though he'd never tell anyone it reminded him of ration candy, past the storefronts now closing for the night, and the firehouse, where a single desk lamp glowed through the window. The town had returned to rhythm, but its heartbeat was different now, because a man no longer had to fall to be noticed, because the next time someone like Ray walked a hallway, there would be one more pause, one more "sir," one more door opened just a second sooner, and that mattered. That meant something. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you are watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.